And welcome back to WBCR 88.3 Saint. I'm Justin Kenny as always. And with me tonight, we have a very special friend of the not college, university. I remember it's now university. Dan Jason from Novus Clothing. So, Dan, thank you for being with us and joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on the air with you and share some inspiration and encouragement. I'm excited.
Yeah, so why don't you start us off a little bit by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so certainly grew up in the Hudson Valley area. Siena College was something that was a staple throughout my life, going to games and being part of different camps and organizations with the college. I actually attended Lemoyne, which is out in Syracuse, played basketball out there for Steve Evans, who actually was on the staff at Siena. So it's a small world how everything comes full circle. And now, yeah, I'm the operations director at Novus Clothing Company, which is located right here in Latham. So we do custom sportswear and apparel. We do a lot with Siena basketball, the athletic department across the board, and then a lot of local colleges and certainly a ton of organizations and youth sports through professional athletics throughout the country. So it's a growing business that's here in Latham. Our tagline is "Claim Your Crown." We're excited to partner with Siena this season and see how well we can have those Saints marching into a lot of victories this year.
Yeah. And so obviously, I know you and I talked before, and we talked a lot about obviously a lot of things from faith to business to customer service, stuff like that. So I kind of want to bring all three of those together. And kind of this first question I ask you is that obviously, like faith leads to being a good person. We would like to think, obviously, I mean, there are some people who use faith in a bad way, but when you can use your faith in business and service, how does it kind of lead you in order to do good business, or as like as you put it, novice, claim your crown?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think really having a business that stands for something, that it's founded on some really important pillars. So for us, it's passion, conviction, and perseverance. We believe that doing those things by living out those elements, that someone can claim their crown, whether they're an athlete, they're someone in the business world, they're a student, they're a member of the community. And it's really all boils down to finding something that you really believe in wholeheartedly, and you stick true to who you are as a person, as a brand, as a college, and then obviously going out there and giving it your all every single day. And hopefully, by doing that and leading a life that way, it encourages and inspires other people to do that in their own way, because everybody feels that they might have a different mission or a different calling in life. So as a business, if we can create a product, we can have a unique experience, we have this ability to invite customers in and develop this culture. It allows people to be inspired to want to go out there and to chase down what their dreams are and to ultimately uncover what their passions are in life. And in doing so, the hope is that they can impact many others along the way.
Yeah, and so I mean, obviously you bring up customer service as well in our last talk, where it's like you told me I'd like the rule of eight. If somebody's like within 8 feet of you or whatever, you greet them, make sure you notice them or whatever. And one story that came back to my mind with that was about Father Michael Judge, who was a Franciscan friar. He was the first recorded death on 9/11, and he also was at one point a friar at Siena. And Father Kevin Mullen, who was president back, I want to say like 2015 is when he left. He left the year before I arrived, I believe. He knew Father Judge a lot down in the city. He always told this one story about how everybody would just hand him a dollar, like a dollar bill. Like Father Michael Judge was the king of New York in some ways. And he would just have this wad of dollar bills, and he would go around to homeless people and
Mm.
just hand them a dollar bill. And he said, I don't know if that dollar bill is going to dope. I don't know if it's going to alcohol. I don't know what it's going towards. But he would sit there and just have a conversation with them for like 5 minutes, whatever. And he said, I always made sure to get their name as like a piece of dignity for them. And there's
Mm.
even a photo that I have of Father Judge that's somewhere. Um, I'm in the middle of a move, so all my stuff's like kind of discombobulated in my apartment currently. But there's a photo of him just shaking hands and smiling with a homeless guy. and it comes from that. It's like when you think of greeting a customer or a client, how does basically like your greeting and how you make them feel go into how much of a great experience they have?
Yeah, no, I mean that's a tremendous example that he did and shared and showed really because it is about showing up. And sometimes we're the one that shows up in someone else's life, and sometimes a customer or a client is showing up on our doorstep or at our business, and how we're approaching them, how we make them feel. It means everything. It really comes back to what Maya Angelou said, that people are going to forget what you say, they're going to forget sometimes even what you do, but no one forgets how you made them feel. So if you create an unmatched experience, if you leave them feeling happier, excited, energized, just more positive than when they came through the doors, then that's a win, regardless if the sale landed or something else happened in between. If they're feeling better, then they're going to attribute that feeling and the whole culture, the whole environment that they just experienced with who you are as a company, but also who you are as a person. And I think that that translates really well across everything, life and business and everything in between. Because you mentioned persons on the margins, something else I'm very passionate about. When you show up in people's lives and you give them the time of day, when you look them in the eye, when you hear them out, and that's something in the business world that I think a lot of times might go unnoticed is how good is your front linesman, right? How good is your customer service team? How good are those people who are fielding those maybe difficult conversations or phone calls or emails? Are they doing it with grace? Or are they doing it with a smile? Are they then turning that into an opportunity? And that's something that I've learned over the years, to look at things that might have first appeared as just straight issues or problems, look at them as opportunities to meet someone where they are, really recognize what they see in this situation, how we can work together to make it better, and ultimately we leave better off. And some of the greatest mistakes or issues from the past can sometimes be the greatest blessings based on how we respond to it, how we invite people in, and how we work on it together.
Yeah, because I also noticed that it goes both ways, where it's just like not only for in customer service, it's not only just basically how the person who's providing the service reacts, but how the person who's getting the service reacts. Where it's a
Absolutely.
two-way street sometimes. Now, I'm not saying that like the customer is always right. I've been in finance, I've been in insurance, I've been in retail. There are I've had several experiences where the customer isn't right, and you have to try to explain that to them. But there are other moments when like you just have to realize that some people just don't see you as a real person in customer service. It's just how it is. Like I also work retail and I've been chewed out, cursed out. I've had coins thrown at me by customers. But I remember one of my bosses at my current job, I work in retail banking. One of my managers told me, first off, never bring your outside in.
Mm.
So if crap's going on in the world that's messing you up, whether it's your money's tight, girlfriend dumped you, whatever, never bring it in to work and never bring work home unless it's good or you got fired. So you keep the balance between the two and you don't like get angry at home, you don't get angry at work, whatever. But he also told me is that 9 times out of 10, when somebody takes their anger out on you when they're at your job or whatever, it's not you that's the problem.
Yeah, for sure.
Something else is normally going on in the world where you're the only outlet to take it out on.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
And
I totally agree. I also think it's one of those things that reminds us when, we're approaching life, that everybody's doing this for the first time. Some of us have different reps in different areas. But I know now, say there's a customer service issue that I was on the other end of the spectrum of, maybe I was buying a product or had an experience that I didn't think was the greatest, and I'm reaching out to another team of another company. I know one of the things that I certainly lead with is, sir or ma'am, I know that this is not a direct reflection of you. I just am bringing this issue up, that this has happened, and I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with the situation. Is there something we can do to make this better? And, communication is one of those things that in life, I think we sometimes take for granted now more than ever, with the amount of devices that we have that can help us to communicate. It hampers our ability to have real life conversations with people
yeah,
in person, or on a phone or something like that. But it's one of the, I think, most critical elements of being a good person in business, but also just a human being, and understanding we're not always going to agree, and that's okay. And sometimes we have to agree to disagree, but genuine respect and just looking at it from a lens of love. If you think about that, and going further, with Siena being a great Franciscan university, Jesuit university for Lemoyne college rather, but looking at it in that framework, how do I approach this situation? How do I approach this person? And how am I doing it differently than the world would do it? Because people recognize that and they'll see that right away. It'll be very clear that you're living for something greater than yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's also why I think a lot of people say that like one major red flag for them on whether it be dating or like sales meetings or whatever is how that person treats
Mm,
service staff.
yeah.
Because it's just like, hey, if I wasn't here as like a guy with a bunch of money to like buy products from you or sell them, or if I wasn't like a guy or a gal that you were like looking to potentially spend the rest of your life with, why would I want to spend a life with you if you're or do a deal with you if you're just going to be a jerk to somebody who's not involved?
Hmm. Yeah. Not business ethics, the way that we approach life, probably the way that people do business really is at the core who they are. So if you reverse that and you recognize who someone is, you know that they're authentic and genuine, in my opinion. If you recognize the way that they are treating other people, and that's translating into how they do business. When I was teaching in the inner city Albany, I had a mentor, and we were teaching younger kids too, as elementary school, but she was always sharing, like, to the kids, you attract more bees with honey than you do vinegar, right? So it's
Yeah.
like thinking about how we're approaching life, the way that we would want to feel, and how we make other people feel obviously goes a long way. And here's the thing, one really great instance is something to build on, but one negative interaction or short-tempered moment can damage your reputation for years. So it's one of those things, you got to build up trust, and you got to work really hard to maintain it and do everything possible to not lose it.
Yeah, because recently, like I started working in retail banking, and so part of my job is selling mortgages. And so I went around to my uncles, and I have uncles who are very successful in sales and business. Like one literally has built a multi-billion-dollar company from the ground up, and um, like well, book a business from the ground up. But I remember asking him and my other uncle, who's a national sales leader, I believe in vet meds for the other one. Both of them gave kind of similar advice to me. One, the one in vet tech, vet meds, told me people want to work with good people. People don't want to work with somebody that feels like a jerk or an a-hole, whatever. And then the other one told me after I told him, like, hey, we might have this deal for you, even though I don't work for you anymore, but might be able to put something through for you. And then he goes, just like, yeah, I'll sit down and talk to them. But he then just breaks into this whole entire thing of um, how you operate yourself in business. And he goes, be a good person, be knowledgeable, keep your nose clean. Your business and reputation will follow. And it's kind of funny how some of the more successful people I know in life um, tend to be some of the people who focus the most on being kind or being good people. Where it's like there's actually research that shows that givers actually go farther than takers,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they just take longer to get there.
No, I totally agree with that. We live in a day and an age now where people are thinking about, how can I rob, cheat, and steal my way to the top? How can I, press on other people to kind of elevate myself? And it's this me first mentality. But when you develop a culture as a team, you recognize if we have buy-in from our team members, we develop this different way. At Lemoyne, actually, Coach Champion and I were talking about this the other day, with the season coming to tip off soon. And it's like, what is the Lemoyne way? What's the Siena way? What's the novice way? Right. and you develop your own way in your own personal life too, or within your family, and people recognize that, and it's different and it stands out, but it also draws in the right people to want to be part of it. And then when you have the right team and you're able to coach and lead and help people to grow, then they're not only living that, but they're also, it's becoming infused not only in the business but also in their day of, in the regular life, and people recognize it, and that becomes attractive and people want to be part of it. Even if they don't know what it is in the beginning, they're like, man, there's something different about that place or that school or those, that community, and I want to be part of it. And at the end of the day, I mean, the more that we can want people to be part of our lives and they find something good about it, hopefully that good news is spread, to many places.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to switch a little bit to faith, which I know is a very important topic to you. I can see Mary in the background there as well. Um, so one question I have for you is kind of what keeps your faith so strong? Is there like certain person, certain events, chain of events, characteristics, certain thing? Like what keeps your faith so strong?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to in my teenage years, I had a really difficult high school situation. I went through a lot of adversity, a lot of persecution when it comes to the faith, and also just a lot of just personal difficulty. So being tried and tested made me really dig in, and you're going to find it one of two places. You're either going to try to avert that difficulty, and you're going to cover it up with other substances or other activities that are detrimental to yourself, or you could dig into something that will help you to have resolve and persevere and understand that you can't do this by yourself. That's okay. And it's okay to not have to have everything all figured out. And fortunately, by the grace of God, I went down that route. And with a lot of guidance, obviously, from a lot of great people and mentors and stuff like that to grow in the faith. For me, it's really recognizing the fact that without Christ in my life, I am very limited. Like, yeah, certainly we have to take the initiative. We have to be a go-getter. You have to always, want to be reflective and be growing, but it's the X factor. And more than
Yeah.
that, it goes far beyond this world, obviously, the meaning of our life. But for me, it's like keeping that center. And if I remain centered on what matters most, then the other things that are happening in my life, whether it be business or family or relationships or anything, will not get out of whack, will not kind of take over and make me forget not only who I am but whose I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's just like it's normally for people with strong faith, there's normally a reason behind it. And like I've always said there's two ways to deal with tragedy. And I have two examples of it within my family where it's like my father, even though him and I are not on speaking terms, it's more or less just blame. It's never me, it's somebody else. He does have faith himself, but it's a different type of faith. My grandparents, for instance, who are no longer with us, always kind of took something through strength and perseverance and their love of God. Where it's like they had 13 kids, but what's left out of that story is that there was a 14th,
Mm.
their firstborn, my aunt Donna, who passed away after 19 days.
Wow.
And so after that firstborn passing away, you can go either one of two routes. Either I don't want to have kids anymore, or like parental trauma, this and that. Or what they did was then said, we want to have as many kids as God wants us to have.
Mm.
And they went out and have 13. Um, Now, granted, was there a lot of difficulty in that time? Yes. Did they ever have money? No, they were raising 13 kids. Um, there's it's probably one of the greatest stories I've ever heard or seen. It's from my grandparents, but there were times where it was tough. People would leave food on their front porch because they couldn't afford food, even though my grandfather was making a ton of money for the 70s. They would get
Mm.
hate mail. They would literally, like, this is why, like, I said this to Howard, who's a friend of the show. That's like what I look for in a partner, even though I'm a single guy who just got off a like 2 year on and off again relationship, is that when I look for a wife or a partner or a girlfriend, whatever, I need somebody that I can be broke with
Mm.
and look at it and know it's going to be okay, just like my grandparents did when they were raising their 13 kids and would
Yeah.
sit around the kitchen table deciding what bill not to pay.
Yeah, I
And
think that's
yeah, go
that's
ahead.
that's powerful. I was just gonna say trust. That's the main word that comes there, right? Trusting not only one another in that relationship, but trusting God, like being dependent. I think that's one of the main attributes that people lack today is this surrender, right? And it's not just,
Yeah.
wave the white flag, I gave up on life and everything should be handed to me. No, it's actually the opposite. It's yes, you are working diligently, you are doing the right things, you are taking one step forward, progressing, but you're surrendering, recognizing there's a lot in this life that's out of our control. So if you have faith and you have trust, then that leads you then to have hope that tomorrow will be better than today, especially if you're in a poverty stricken situation, or maybe you're doing or in a situation in life where you feel stuck. And I'm sure some of your listeners out there, college students, young adults, business professionals, probably can attest to the fact of sometimes feeling stuck. But as long as you can see a little bit of that light at the end of the tunnel at the end of that day and recognize you have someone who's going to help you. And we're not just talking about the people in the room, we're talking about God
Yeah.
who loves you and sees that he has a future for you. You have to believe that. And if you do, things will
Yeah.
get better. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, it's funny that you say like tomorrow will be better and you have somebody with you, is because that's what has kind of always kept my faith so strong, where it has been a rocky childhood. I'm a child of multiple divorces. I was involved in a family fist fight when I was like 14, 15 years old and other things. But then recently, I was having dinner with Brother Michael Perry, who's the former head of the Global Franciscan Order. He's now at Siena. And we were having dinner, and it was just him and I. And he asked me, he's like, what keeps your faith so strong? And I said, like, well, I'm not good at memorizing like Bible verses or anything like that, but as I do read and study Bible, I'm just really good at memorizing verses. I'll admit that. But I said basically one thing I pointed out was this bracelet
Mm.
that I only really started wearing like a little less than a year ago. But I'm at the point now where if I don't have it, I
Mm.
feel naked. It's kind of acts as a reminder. But I started wearing it after a chain of events over the past few years when I left Goldman Sachs, when I got laid off, which is I tried starting a financial planning practice. I went broke. I literally lost all my money, and I've been rebuilding myself ever since then. My sister-in-law got married at 34 years old, and 6 months later died while cutting another woman's hair.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
there was there was a domestic violence shooting in my apartment complex, like literally right above me,
Holy
old
cow.
complex now. I wasn't home when it happened, but I left like less than an hour before it happened.
Jeez.
And then there was literally dealing with a woman getting run over by a car when I was on shift at my night job. But I can remember particularly, and like there's only really one of two ways you can react after those chain of events, especially after a long period of time,
Mm.
which is either why does God effing hate me or F the world,
Yeah.
or basically like I have somebody with me.
Right.
Um, and so like I remember like when you said like tomorrow is gonna be better. I remember when I was being escorted to my apartment after the morning after the shooting by a cop.
Mm.
And obviously I'll admit it was the weirdest shower I've ever taken. Because it was so eerily quiet in that complex. And there was blood all over the place outside. It was a wild scene. But I remember while I was being escorted, just what came through my head was I can build something better than this.
Mm.
Meaning more or less. And I've said it to myself after every single thing, like the family fist fight, the divorces, the other things else. So it's just like I can build something better than this. And it's
Yeah.
meaning like more or less just like building a stable family, building that. And it also taught me more about like even back to like the conversation we had before with customer service, de-escalation, where it's just like whenever I'm in a conflict, whether it be when I was with my girlfriend or somebody in customer service, I know it's my job to keep the level here.
Sure.
Where even if they're yelling or whatever, it's my job to stay calm and not escalate things because that's how things get worse, but still have to address it so it doesn't go underlying where it just creates more problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great approach to take. It makes me think of a few things, and one scripture that I definitely lean heavily on, I did my whole life and still to this day, Jeremiah 29:11. We talk about the plans that God has for our life, plans to
Yeah.
prosper us, not to harm us, plans to give a hope in a future. During those disastrous moments, during those times where like, where is God? What happened? Does he care? Does he exist? Because here's the thing a lot of people should recognize and think about. And they may have heard of this book, they may not have. They should check it out. Highly encourage you as well if you haven't. It's Come Be My Light. It's a book by Mother Teresa. It's really her hidden secret diary entries that she wrote. And they got released, and technically they weren't supposed to, but it was a blessing that they did, because she, even one of the greatest of all saints, who gave herself completely to the service of the poor, and most people will regard as like one of the holiest people to ever live, doubted and questioned the existence of God. And so it reminded me, when I'm reading this book and hearing these stories that you just shared and thinking about my own life, all of us are going to face really hard things. Some maybe arguably more difficult than others, but there's an inevitable factor about being a human being. You're going to face some real tough stuff. That's real talk. How
Yeah.
you respond to it and who you turn to, right, is the ultimate game changer. And I know that could be easier said than done, but if people haven't tried faith, if they haven't, attempted to getting connected with a community that can help them in it, and just receive them fully, to your point before of like welcoming people in, not judging and just walking with, because that's accompaniment, try that, because it could
Yeah.
really be the X factor. And the other part of it is, when you're at the lowest of the low, the only place you could go is up. So I say that, you know, not insensitively, but recognizing when you're at the bottom of the barrel, like many characters in the Bible were. And that's why referring to the word is a great thing too. Those like Job,
Yeah.
when he lost everything, but he's still, thanking God for what he did have. It's that perspective. And we need reminders of it from history. We need reminders of it, people like yourself sharing these stories, so people don't think, oh, well, Justin has everything figured out and everything's been perfect in his life. Or Dan, everything's going great. Nothing has ever been difficult. People need to see and recognize that that isn't true, but that you're able to overcome it and to continue to move forward.
Yeah. And another thing that comes to my mind too is that you have to find your own path in faith. One quote from actually one book that I hand out quite frequently to people, as I do hand out books from time to time,
Awesome.
is I don't know if you're familiar with Phil Jackson.
Oh, of course.
You ever read his book 11 Rings?
So I haven't read the whole thing. I've read excerpts from it.
Yeah, so I've read it and I've handed that book out to numerous people. It's one of like my top 5 books that like I probably would recommend to people. But there's a part of that book where he's on the Knicks and he's fixing up this like apartment he purchased or whatever when he was playing for the Knicks. And he has a Muslim handyman with him.
Mm.
And Jackson, even though he's not the most faithful person, he still has faith. Both his parents are ministers, and he was sitting there talking with them while they were doing work. And the Muslim handyman goes to him and says, "There's no such thing as a grandson of God, only a son of God."
Mm.
Basically, say to him like, "You're not a grandson, you're a son. You're not taking your parents' faith and continuing it. You're creating your own faith and going with it."
Like that. Yeah,
And I think that's cool. Yeah.
that's super powerful. It also is the invitation to that personal relationship. Something that resonated with me, and I'm sure he shared it in the book. I read one of his more famous quotes, and he said a lot of great things. Obviously, being the coach of Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant. I mean, you're coaching some of the greatest athletes to ever play any sport. And he said, "No man is an island. No man goes his way alone. what we put into the lives of others comes back to our own. So
Yeah.
what I got from that was, even in these dark, difficult situations, we might feel isolated, but we're not alone because God's there, but also there are other people. And if you're at the bottom of the barrel, if you're really going through something, I challenge people today to do something for someone else. Now, this sounds counterintuitive because when you're facing a grave difficulty or challenge, it's like you want to be reserved, you want to kind of shelter inward. But the opposite should be true. If we get ourselves out there, we do something positive, we do an act of kindness, we help somebody, that's going to do a 180 and flip the script on our life, and that momentum will be carried through. And I think a great teacher, coach, motivator like Phil Jackson would probably agree with the fact that when you do things for other people, not only does it fill your bucket, but it's like that assist on the basketball court. You're feeding somebody else, and they make the shot, the team can win. We're all feeling good that time.
Yeah. One of the more famous Albany residents at one point too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You'll tend to forget that the two arguably greatest head coaches in NBA history are both have connections to the Albany area.
Which is phenomenal. It's great in basketball's roots, and that's a whole nother thing that we should have that appreciation that great things can come not only from the area that we live in, right, the 518, but also to your point before, you said no one is a grandson, they're a son. That is an invitation for us to believe we can make something great of our life and kind of carve out our own destiny, so to speak, and make our own splash.
Yeah, because like if you ask a lot of people about where they get their identity, whether it be their religious beliefs or their political beliefs or you name it, 9 times out of 10, it's just like, oh, my parents were Republican, so I'm a Republican, or oh, my parents were Catholic,
Yeah.
so I'm Catholic. Like, it never really comes into that. I mean, like, my father's Protestant, my mother's Catholic, but I've been baptized Catholic, I've been confirmed, I've gone to Catholic school since first grade. But I did go to Protestant services, and I said I liked how the Protestant church is more on a personal relationship with God. Well, I like the structure and the not real rigidness. I mean, I don't do everything the Catholic Church preaches, but like it's still something that's very important to me. And I am more Catholic than I am Protestant, but I like the structure. I like the kind of the institutional, like academia of the Catholic Church in some ways as well.
Yeah.
But like you have to, I guess, find your own path. Whereas, like instead of just going like, oh, my parents are Catholic, so I'm just Catholic.
Yeah. I think that's a big thing with faith, is not just defaulting to what someone says or tradition or history or what your family does, but like really digging into the why. Like, why do you believe what you believe? Why are you going to spend an hour a week, or in my case, like by God's grace, been just wanting to. I go to daily mass, and people are like, why?
Yeah.
And if you can answer that question definitively, and you know the reason behind it, then you know you're walking down a path that's greater than you once were, right? So it's one of those things that, again, you don't have to have it all figured out. Actually, I think the minute that you think you do, you're no longer humble and you're not going to be in a good spot. It's one of those things we got to continue to grow and to progress and to question and to be searching, because obviously the truth is out there, and there's a lot of things that are trying to rob our attention or detract us. But like it says, the truth will set you free. You'll have peace. Like, so it might be a storm, kind of like likened to the gospel when they're out in the sea and the winds are blowing and Jesus is actually asleep, and they're like, how can you be sleeping when the storm's going on? Well, you're going to have peace. It doesn't mean things are going to be easier, but you'll
Yeah.
feel that inner peace when you are walking down that right path.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to have that inner peace where it's just like, it's funny how, like, I personally myself, where I've noticed it where before, I would be in situations where I would freak out. Where like right now, like when I first went broke, like 2 or 3 years ago, I was freaking out like nonstop. And now money is a little tight because I've taken jobs that don't pay as much as Goldman, but it's more or less jobs for learning. And so money is a little tight, but I'm just like, you know what? I've been in worse spots. I've come back. Like I know like life is seasonal, so it's
Mm.
gonna be okay sooner or later. And it's helped me get through a lot more now than just being like, oh crap, why does the world hate me? Why is like this and that happen? Like all that stuff, which is not really a healthy way to live anyway.
No, definitely not. I would also argue sometimes as much as people don't like uncomfortable situations, if we think about in a basketball game, you're down 7, there's a minute to go. So you got a couple possessions left. And it forces you as an athlete, as a coach, as the team to get completely scrappy, right? You got full court press on. Time is of the essence, and you're going all out and no holds bar. Well, in our life, when we're up against the wall, that automatically forces us to actually dig deeper and to take massive action quicker. So I've learned in time to not be so against difficulties from happening, but actually embrace them. And even people might think this is odd, but to seek them out because it creates this ability to get places sooner than you once were able to, because you have to have that resolve and you fortify this energy within yourself and you find that next level that maybe you didn't know you once had because you have to.
Yeah, and I mean it all comes into also a trusting yourself, which I learned that lesson luckily in high school when I fell off a 30-foot rappel tower and caught myself. I could see you just shaking your head.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I fell off, caught myself, but I got down there. Just seeing your reaction to that. Um, I'm not your typical 27-year-old if you haven't been able to tell. And I get down there and there's this sergeant there because it was JRTC camp, Sergeant First Class Costello, and he looks at me, and he was intimidating to like everybody, like literally everybody. Like next year I went again. There's like Costello scares the hell out of his men, and he looks at me and he makes just eye contact with me. And he says it very softly. He just goes, "You just have to learn to trust yourself," and that's always stuck with me ever since. Where it's just like you just have to learn to trust yourself. But I also want to go on another thing Howard said in our interview, because Howard is a marriage counselor. And he goes like, yeah, Justin, some couples like are still together, even though they probably wouldn't work if they knew more about themselves. They probably would end up getting divorced, even though divorce does not mean you're a failure or that your marriage was a failure. But there are some couples or some people who just never don't really know themselves because they never push themselves out of their comfort zone. They never know what they're like in challenging situations because they just stayed on the same path. They never tried something new. And I think it's important to force yourself into those uncomfortable situations because it makes you more comfortable in uncomfortable situations where you're just like, oh, like I can come back from this. I've done it before, or it's not as bad as it could
Yeah.
be.
No,
Um,
absolutely. That's
yeah,
so true. I talk to people about failing forward. In
yeah,
business, we talk about that. Should I take this risk? Should I go for this? What happens if it doesn't work? You have to fail forward because speaking about basketball, it was great. So I'm watching Cooper Flag's debut. Okay. And I was
yeah,
thinking about something that his mom and he talked about. And we had the pleasure at Novus actually working with him for quite a bit of years from his 8th grade year until he went to Mount Verde Academy, and having some conversations with him and his parents. It's very well mannered young man, but a go getter, and also somebody that recognizes I have to be better and there has to be a chip on my shoulder. And his mom
yeah,
said something that I thought was really clever and wise. And she said, if you're the best player in the gym, you're in the wrong gym. And for us in life, like if we're comfortable, if things are easy, we're not doing what we really should be doing. So if you're failing forward, like it's not a failure unless you just give up. And, thinking
Yeah.
about your journey or my journey, you wouldn't be where you are today if it was easy street. The minute someone plateaus, that is the epitome of a loss that's going to happen. It's like the Super Bowl hangover. It's really hard to win and to keep winning. But if you keep raising the bar, the level of the standard as you go and you climb the rung, that's how you then train yourself to have that discipline to never settle. And in never settling, you're always going for more. And that doesn't mean that you're not grateful for the blessings of life or the accomplishments or what God provides, but it's more of, I always want to grow. I always want to become better because there's more out there for me to accomplish, but also there's more people to inspire or to hopefully help or to impact. At least that's what I've come across in, my 36 or so years of living.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where like we got about 5 minutes left too, by the way. But one thing I've always liked since I heard it for the first time is that fail stands for first attempt in learning.
Mm.
Is that anybody who says I'm afraid of failure is kind of an idiot. Um, Not to be frank, but it's true. Anybody who comes onto graduation stage or like in a job interview, it's just like, I'm afraid of failure. In context, you might think it sounds good, but it's terrible. Like somebody who's afraid of failure is afraid of trying something.
They're
And
probably really afraid of succeeding.
yeah, yeah. And I remember Bourdain before he died in one interview said something about eating meals while traveling, and it reigns true. And I didn't really realize it until after I left my girlfriend. I recently broke up. Um, is that you're never going to get the good meal unless you take the bad one.
Mm.
And it's one of those things where like it can also be applied to life is that you're not going to get the good unless you get the bad, because then you start to have a better appreciation and understanding of like what's good. Oh, hey, this is good. Or like, what do I actually need to be successful? Or whether it be a relationship, business, you name it.
Yeah, or you recognize, hey, I didn't like how that tasted, so I'm not going down that route again. I'm gonna
Yeah.
order that on the menu, right? No, but in all seriousness, it's one of those things that it's a forever a learner, right? We used to say at the school that I taught at, it was always better, never best, meaning like, well, what does that mean? I mean, why wouldn't you give your best effort? No, that's not what it's about. It's you're never thinking that there's a ceiling. And some people listening to this might be like, that's pie in the sky stuff. Like that stuff is not applicable. We're talking about 1% victories. We're talking about improving a little bit on a weekly basis or monthly basis. If you do that, the compound impact that it has in your life, you talk about being a finance guy, it's
Yeah.
exponential. It's like, you may have heard this before, and I love the analogy, bamboo. Bamboo is a plant that grows wildly, right? Rainforest, and it grows out of control and you can't stop it from growing. But it takes like 2 years to break the soil. And people don't recognize the fact that in their life, you have to lay the foundation, whether it's faith, whether it's athletics or education, relationships. It takes time to build that foundation. When the foundation is firm, then the growth will happen. And when you keep getting a little bit better and you start watering it, man, it's going to grow out of control. And then you're going to see things happen in your life that you're like, man, I never expected that to happen. But it does, and you enjoy the ride.
Yeah, and that's a great way to end it. Sadly, we are out of time because I really enjoyed this conversation. But this has been WVCR with 88.3 Saints. I'm Justin Kenny as always, and with me tonight we've had the pleasure of having Dan Jason from Novice Clothing. So Dan, thank you for being with us.
Absolutely. And make sure everybody
Yeah.
checks out the Siena Saints coming up this Monday. And like we say at Novice, claim your crown.
Yeah. And for everybody out there in Radio Land, have a good one.